Hello, good morning. I hope you're all well. I'm moving a lot of my stuff today, so I'm enjoying it in its way, but it's a pain in the arse at the same time. I hate moving. But look, I've been asked to give my thoughts on our broken prison system, so I'm going to do that the best I can. It's only my kind of perspective on it all, but I think my perspective is based on knowledge and experience. So let's have a go. I can take it all the way back to 2008 credit crunch. That moment, that problem was very likely the first kind of stepping stone for what's gone on since in the prison service. And you can say that the prison service is run by the government. The government uses public purse, taxpayer money to fund those things, just like the NHS, just like social care, and lots of other bits and bobs. Prisons, obviously. You may not be affected by the cuts financially to the prison service, but you probably are, some of you, in some way or other. You just maybe don't quite see it in black and white. But essentially, this country's been pretty much bankrupt since the credit crunch. We've been borrowing, successive of prime ministers, of which there's been about 37 since 2008, have told us everything's great, and I'm sick and tired of being reminded by successive PMs that we're the fifth largest economy in the world. I look at that and just think, well, anything below us, that country must be fucked, because we're fucked. I can add into that probation. I haven't had a probation officer for 3 months. It's all good, and I had a remote appointment yesterday with a nice enough lady. We spoke for probably about an hour, but I'm, without being dramatic, I am a relatively high-profile ex-criminal on license, and it's fine, and I understand that I haven't been seen, but it just demonstrates that things don't, that everybody in these kinds of organisations, they're all just fighting almost a losing battle, and I take my hat off to them for that, because it can't be easy, and it doesn't look like it's likely to improve anytime soon. So I think that's where problems that I saw on my second sentence really sort of, that's where their roots are, that 2008 credit crunch. What happened in 2012 or 13 when I was out of prison was that the prison service offered every officer a voluntary redundancy. And I believe that if they took it, I think their payoff was around about £50,000. There was a caveat to that from the Home Office. They could choose to come back into the service at a later time if they wanted, but they'd have to give all their redundancy money back. I don't think that was ever going to happen. In my second sentence, I never met one prison officer who used to be, took the voluntary redundancy and then came back later. I think a lot of them were glad to get out. They could see what was going on. Prisons became just dramatically more violent places in that period, sort of from 2010, I think it really started to kind of ramp up. And so then that in itself created a further problem, because I saw screws on my second sentence who were hardened, experienced screws, and even they, you know, they could have a tear up and all of it, but even they were, some of them would say to me, you know, I had to get out of this prison because I feared for my safety, and I never don't think I experienced that on my first sentence. And little things, I mean, they're little, but they're kind of big. That obviously the overcrowding, it's always been a hot topic since I first went away in 2003, but now it looks like it's reached kind of critical mass. Talking about reducing the incarcerated part of a sentence from 50% to 40%. That's quite a dramatic change. Will it happen? I don't know. I don't look at the news. I don't read papers anymore. There's a big noise about it. Maybe it will happen, but can you see a new government pushing that through as soon as they're elected in however long it is, 3 or 4 weeks? I don't even know when the election is. I doubt it. So just going back to the redundancies, people took them. Prison was grossly, ridiculously short-staffed for a long time. It still is. When I came back to prison in 2014, I just could not believe the changes. On my first sentence, if you kicked off and acted out, they just wrapped you up and threw you in the block. It was a very simple, quick process. Boom, see you later, mate. Now, people in prison, if they shout loud enough and stamp their feet enough and make enough threats to staff, they pretty much get whatever they want. And that is just a huge change, massive. I never saw anything like that on my first sentence. You would get people kicking off and screaming and shouting, but they would just be placated using their training, the staff, but they wouldn't be they wouldn't have things thrown at them just to calm them down and just to keep them quiet, because obviously that then becomes an infection that goes through the prison system, and that is what's happened. If you know anyone who's been in prison in the last 10 years, ask them. They'll tell you, and they may have even been some of the people doing it. Scream loud enough, make enough threats, cause enough ag, and they will pretty much give you what you want. So in that sense, that is another example of how the prison system is broken, because the tail is wagging the dog now, and that's how I put it within 6 months of going back to prison in 2014, and I could see it as clear as day. And you have to bear in mind, I went back to prison with a severe traumatic brain injury, and I was genuinely on the point of suicide for the first year. So none of this stuff really mattered to me. It didn't affect me, because I was down the deepest abyss that I'd ever been in, really. In some ways, although I have sampled a few other abysses in my life. But I just remember seeing staff, but I saw loads of staff get clumped on my second sentence. I didn't see it often in my first sentence, and when I did, the response was swift and severe, usually. But, you know, this time around... And then what happened was, of course, Boris came in and said, yes, we're gonna put 10,000 new prison staff, blah, blah, blah. I don't even think they've managed that now. And the trouble is, no one ever mentioned at their end that while they're gathering up these few thousand prison staff numbers had already dropped by, I think, I may be wrong here, but I think it was